This week on the Jerusalem Post podcast, the Jerusalem Post podcast hosts the Jerusalem Post, a bunch of Jerusalem Post employees from all ranks and all sides of the newspaper, asking them about their holiday traditions, their favorite Israeli foods, and their favorite stories that they have covered for the Jerusalem Post. This is the Jerusalem Post podcast. I'm your host, Tamar Uriel-Beeri, editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Report, and I am joined once more not by night editor Sarah Ben-Nun, but by legal and crimes correspondent Sarah Ben-Nun.
Hi, hello.
Hello, correspondent. Hello, reporter. Congratulations.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting.
We're actually recording on your first day on the beat.
Yeah.
And nobody has actually told you this yet, but I'm sure you haven't encountered it yet, but you know that whoever covers legal and crimes for the Jerusalem Post also specifically needs to report on ecology, like environment stuff. It's kind of important, like global warming.
I think we'll have to pass on that. I don't know.
That's kind of part of the job, though. You really need to cover that. I don't know if anybody's told you that yet. April Fools. That was the worst.
Wait, I have a. Yeah, that was not very strong.
It was. I came up with it on the spot.
One funny anecdotal story relating to this and April Fools.
Okay.
Over the last week or so, I joined our previous interim legal correspondent, Mike Starr,
who was also before that the permanent legal correspondent.
He was the permanent legal correspondent. Mike hopped in when the Netanyahu trial testimonies began, and so he's been kind of doing that and his main beat, which is diaspora affairs, which he does a phenomenal job in. And
he's usually pretty bored. He doesn't have much to do.
Right. No anti-Semitic graffiti anywhere. No protests, nothing. So for over the last week or so, I've been joining him at the Tel Aviv District Court where Netanyahu has been giving his testimony. And last week we were walking over there and we're walking. It's early in the morning. We're getting ready to be there on time. And he was saying that the schedule is difficult for him because he's kind of covering two different things at the same time and kind of waiting for me to transition into the role. And he said, oh no, last week he said this, next week is going to be awful because I need to go in to court 3 days a week. And I said, well, starting from Tuesday, you won't need to because I'm starting on April 1st. Meaning you'll only have to go in on Monday. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm starting on April 1st. He was like, you're April Foolsing me. That can't be right.
Oh my God, Mike.
And I said, I wish it was that funny. But no, I really did start today on Wednesday, the 1st of April.
I would pull that kind of prank on Mike. You wouldn't pull that kind of prank.
I didn't think that far. I was just being, straight and to the point.
Yeah. Well, and how's it been going so far? It's currently the hottest beat in Israeli media.
There's a lot going on.
I feel like there is a tendency, though, for the Jerusalem Post correspondents to start their beats right when their beats get red flaming hot. Right? So, for example, Mike switched from legal reporting to diaspora reporting right when the post-October 7th anti-Semitic wave began.
Oh, you're right.
Eliab Royer, our political and Knesset correspondent, began that beat right when Israel was announced to go into elections. That's when our former political correspondent, Gil Hoffman, left after 24 years in the position. Just great timing.
I remember that was great timing.
It was so funny.
I feel like I've fallen into tradition, and that is a comfort to me.
Good. You see, you're one of a bunch, You've come into a fruitful community of staying up late and writing news articles that are far more nuanced. But you know what? If anybody can do this, take an extremely difficult subject to translate to human terms, like non-legal jargon, and make it something that's more comfortable to be communicated to a public audience and to really give that translation, it's you. So,
babe.
So
I hope so. I hope to do right.
I'm very excited. Yeah, and like you said, started off.
What a day. Yeah.
So we have the BB trial. So where are we standing at this point on the BB trial?
Okay, so there's a few technical points. First of all, we are still in the testimonies on Case 4000, of which there are...
And Case 4000 is which one?
Case 4000 is the media bribery case, where alleged the suspicion, the allegations are that Netanyahu advanced some reforms and some like political reforms in exchange for positive coverage in Walla.
Yeah, for context, in general, the things that Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is currently being investigated for and on trial for, it's something that when you're covering the news in a more general focus, it's something that's so prominent to us because something so big right now in Israel are the protests, and all we hear are shochad, mirma, hafarat emunim, which is the three things that he is currently being investigated. The three charges, which is bribery, fraud, and breach of trust.
Right. So we are currently in the bribery phase.
This is the bribery
of that, and it's funny because I came into it, kind of looking at it more from a broader perspective. Of
you were the news editor. It's like
yeah. So you see all the protests, all the kind of the dialogue around it, and then you actually get into the nitty gritty of it, and it is. Wonderfully boring. There are 315 items of evidence that the prosecution originally. Keep in mind also this case is like 4 years old.
It is.
And this case has been going on for a long time. There have been
when were the
lawyers
charges
have been switched.
When were the charges presented? What was under Avichai Mandelblit when he was the attorney general?
I remember that. Yeah, it was a long time ago. And as Netanyahu said,
you were in the breaking news desk when this happened. Were you on shift when this happened?
No.
I was.
I don't think. No, I was not.
I was not. I remember we had like an extra. I don't know if it was on purpose or it just happened to be, but we had like an extra person on shift and everything. So we had
that's good.
one person doing this, one person doing that. And I remember I was just in charge of uploading tickers, like quick, short additions to the main article, like about different. And then it was all either Likudim K's saying, no, not a chance. This is evil. This is the search for him is criminal, or the opposite, the opposition and such, saying like, okay, finally.
Interesting, right? So I guess not much is
the evolution.
On that.
Not much has changed on that, no.
No, and Netanyahu said at the beginning, when his testimony began, he said, I've been waiting 8 years for this to tell my side of the story. So that's really what we've been seeing in court, and his defense team is just going through all of these items. Because it's so many items, the judges actually requested that his team condense them into kind of clusters.
Wow.
So like condense into a cluster, like I guess a sort of thematic cluster of
that makes sense.
This shows this and this shows that, and here's how we're gonna
belongs under
respond.
This chapter. This belongs under that chapter.
Yeah. So
sense.
Right now we're still going through correspondences between Netanyahu and various figures that were connected to Walla, including Shaul Elovitch and
media figures.
Like media figures that really could have made those connections and kind of showing, and then like they'll go through it. They'll ask, his defense team will ask the prime minister, "Did you know?" And he'll say, "I didn't." And that sort of thing, just to bring you into the courtroom a bit, that sort of thing just repeats itself throughout. Every now and then you will hear the prime minister express, frustration or just kind of this ludicrous, like, how am I here? This is an insane charge.
Yeah.
This really bribery? He says that a lot. Like, this is bribery? Look at this negative coverage. How is this bribery? So that's kind of where we're at.
Something that
right now.
is known for is like these really awful plays on words in which he just reveals himself to be a father.
They're artful. I don't know. Yeah, it's dad. It's very dad jokes.
What was the one that freaked everybody out? He said something about butts. He said something about...
this I don't know. Netanyahu will kind of say those things, and you sort of, when you're in there, you get a grasp for, what, regardless of what you think about the trials or about his involvement or non-involvement, the fact that a sitting prime minister is
on trial,
is testifying in his own corruption trial while everything else that we know is going on. The insanity of it really just strikes you.
I think that's the one thing that everybody agrees with, that it's crazy that there's a prime minister on trial. It's just that their solutions are opposing. One says he needs to no longer be prime minister. The other side says he needs to be prime minister and not in trial. But that's one of the difficulties. I'm curious if, when it comes to this or any other stories that you've already started kind of researching or even writing, if you've encountered this issue that I've seen time and time again from reporters who say that one of the biggest challenges of being a beat correspondent is that you can, because you know so much detail into these things, because you have such a micro lens, you know exactly where the heart of certain issues are, and they're not in what people expect. And when you write it, nobody cares about the thing that is actually the important thing. I remember one of our reporters got really mad that nobody was caring, for example, that MK Goldknopf, who is head of the United Torah Judaism Party, or no longer.
Can't keep up.
Or an MK in the United Torah Judaism Party. Nevertheless, a Haredi ultra-Orthodox MK who, there was a huge story about last week that he danced to the Naturei Karta theme, which is inherently anti-Israel.
Anti-draft.
It's anti-draft, but it's also an organization that is anti-Israel at its core.
I would just say that the real anti-Zionist elements of it are quite fringe, and that for the most part it's
the organization itself. Part of its foundation is an anti-Zionist narrative.
Right. No, but I'm saying the fringe is the active part, like the protesters that you see and stuff like that. That is not representative of the whole group.
There was just a protest now I saw in Teaneck, New Jersey, of Naturei Karta, which is Teaneck has a really big ultra-Orthodox community.
Big modern Orthodox community, Zionist community, actually. So
one of our correspondents spoke to me and said, Goldknopf dancing, obviously it's terrible. And there's been other accusations, but the really big story is what he did in Beit Shemesh. In Beit Shemesh, which is a very largely religious city, he had taken housing that was not designated for any specific minority group and redesignated for the ultra-Orthodox community. And he showed off about this. He promoted it at an ultra-Orthodox event. That is highly unethical. He later denied that he had done it. And he said that he had said it. He said, my words are being taken out of context. The usual political thing.
The words that I said and the order that I said them are being taken out of context.
But nevertheless, the correspondent that I had spoken with said, this is the story.
Yeah.
This is the story. This is the story of something being taken from one civilian group and being given to another because of your political agenda that supports this.
This is what you're supposed to call
out. It's helping
out.
your brothers and sisters, so to speak, ahead of the masses, ahead of the. You're supposed to, as a politician, serve the people.
I think I'll say just one thing about Beit Shemesh, which is that it has become more ultra-Orthodox over the last few years, and it's growing at an insane rate, the city itself and the ultra-Orthodox community. So you're already talking about a city that's nuanced and interesting and complicated in terms of the residents that it has.
Now, not so much mix. It's already quite a religious area, and then to kind of take housing away to that same.
It's pretty ludicrous.
But anyway. Zooming out, my point of that story was an example of wait, no, this is the story. This is what people should be caring about. And that's not necessarily the story that people are reading right now. So do you have anything like that in your book?
Not quite yet, just because so far what I've covered are the pretty big things, which is the Netanyahu trial and the Qatargate investigation, which we'll touch on in a bit. People care about that. They don't care about all the details. I feel like my job is to just translate it, and the way that I write it is also very much kind of academic, starting at one point, which leads to the next and leads to the next, and to really kind of lay it out, because you're right, it really is easy to get lost in the language of it, and the whole point is to lay it out so that people really understand how these systems works, how they affect them, and how they can hurt them, I guess, and how they can use them to kind of get the most of the rights that they have.
Yeah. So let's really go into that other big story that you've been covering. Let's talk Qatargate, which you called Qatargate, which I love. It's very Israeli
Qatar
of yours.
I think it's pronounced Qatar.
In Arabic, yes, but the Americanization, that's the common pronunciation. I'm not saying Iran or Iraq.
Oh God,
it's Qatar.
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 So Qatar is a Gulf country that we have complicated relations with.
We do have complicated relations with, but they are very central to the negotiations for hostage release, and
they have been
ceasefire.
One of the main mediators
alongside Egypt, France, U.S.
How involved France has been.
France was involved
in the north.
In the north.
I think France was involved in Gaza.
Well, you know what? I grouped it together. That was a wrong move. Right. But nevertheless,
different ceasefires. So that's Qatar. That's Qatar's role. Qatar has been trying to just broaden its global reach, and it does this through various
Not just
ways.
broaden its global reach, interestingly, also shrink Egypt's reach.
Well,
and Egypt
shrink
kind of
regional
hold on success in this deal.
Yes, well, like increase the regional and the global. I think we can't forget the global element here as well. This looks like Al Jazeera, right, on the regional. It's Qatari owned, super popular, and real estate and investment in American universities. And it extends kind of beyond just the global thing. So I do think it's important that we keep that in mind when we talk about Qatar. The investigation.
Let's talk about, let's before we even get to the investigation, let's talk background for Qatargate. So the first thing was obviously members of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's team being accused of having some level of affiliation, not yet public at that point, with Qatari representatives, Qatari figures, some kind of Qatari proxy.
So we need to start, if we're going to start this, we have to start it in around 2019 when several investigative journalists, I think there were several.
Prominently the Middle East, I don't remember what it stands for, I apologize, Memory,
yes.
Brought forth that Netanyahu had authorized the transfer of funds from Qatar to the Israeli government, which was fervently denied by Netanyahu's government, but also the transfer of funds from Qatar directly to Hamas.
Right. So there was that. There was also an investigative piece written by two French journalists, I think two, or several French journalists, in like an independent investigative website. So there was that. There was Memory, and this kind of had been hanging out in the background of a lot of
what's going on between Israel and Qatar
for years. Yeah. For years now, there was a transfer of Qatari funds to Hamas at the time, and so that all that is kind of like hanging out there in the background.
Right. So this wasn't actually this year. This was technically last year. There was this report of a Netanyahu consultant advisor, Eli Feldstein, who the suspicion was that he leaked documents to the German daily newspaper Bild. Yes,
which kind of influenced how the hostage negotiations were going to go.
Well, everybody know, I think it's a pretty common knowledge, and even if it's not common knowledge, it's a common conception and understanding that the impact of the media is massive on public understanding, and therefore
thank you for saying that. That's a good.
And public discourse influences policy, and policy influences things that are serious and life-changing, like hostage negotiations. So leaking information, which I do believe we already know. I think he was already charged with.
So that's Feldstein. That is back then. And then as the months go by, more and more comes out about the connections between other figures in the Prime Minister's office and Qatari officials.
Namely, alongside Feldstein was Jonathan Ulrich, who has been his media advisor and spokesperson, has functioned as a de facto spokesperson for quite some time. He was very public. I think I remember the first time I heard his name, other than just like texting him and asking him to add me to the Likud news WhatsApp group thing, was when I saw that he had out in that WhatsApp group, it had been published that he had removed two journalists that he identified as left-wing, and he had kicked them out, which is, I mean, setting aside legal considerations, is highly unethical if you are in a democratic country.
It's just unprofessional.
It is, yeah. So he kicked two journalists out of that WhatsApp group.
Okay, so that's one figure. The other is Israel Einhorn, who also, I believe, was an advisor. He's not in Israel at the moment. Actually, he's been residing in, I want to say, Serbia.
Outside
somewhere,
of the country.
Definitely not here. So those are kind of the three key figures. Today, actually, okay.
Well, there's also Gil Berger.
So let's clean it up. Today, the Regional Lezion Magistrate Court, which has been kind of handling this whole case, a while ago put a gag order on the whole thing. When everything kind of started to break out, put a gag order. The gag order was, I would say, pretty across the board ignored.
And forgive me, but it was also half-assed. It was announced as under gag order, I think like 24 hours after Ulrich and Feldstein's names were released in connection with this case.
It was. I think that also lends itself to why it wasn't really respected.
Which, by the way, is very rare because gag
rare.
orders in Israel, gag orders or embargoes, they're taken very seriously in this country. And in the past, when they've been disrespected, it was a huge statement unto itself. When coalition members like leak something or something like that, it's a serious thing.
Yeah.
But here it was very much like toiled with and kind of dangled. Like it was.
I mean, I do think that is a bit of a warning shot and a bit of a red flag for both how the gag order was used, as you're kind of implying, and how it was ignored. Like I don't think it's okay in either direction,
right?
Because it makes light of our legal tools, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So today the gag order was lifted, and what the court wrote in its decision so far, and again, these are all allegations, these are all suspicions, they're still investigating this, is that there were three figures, Feldstein, Ulrich, and one other person who wasn't named in the decision, who basically facilitated an connection between Jay Footlick, who
he's a businessman who promotes Qatari agendas because that is what he personally believes in. And he's a businessman in the U.S. who allegedly runs a business called the Third Circle.
The Third Circle, yeah, that's what it's called. And the goal was to boost Qatar's image
in the public eye,
kind of in the public eye. And so a connection was made between those goals and in exchange for some monetary funds in exchange for money. And the goal was to boost Qatar's image with specifically
this
regarding...
is all alleged, obviously.
This is all alleged. It's still kind of unfolding to boost Qatar's image specifically with regards to Israel when it comes to the hostage deal and to kind of belittle Egypt's role, right? Because we have the think about the hostage negotiations for a sec. We have the Americans who are kind of coming in super strong, big guns, right? Especially like with Trump's announcement and re-election and all that. And then you have two other mediators who are on the ground. Egypt is literally a neighbor of Gaza. It borders with Gaza.
Yep.
It has a vested interest in what happens, as all states do, to their neighboring countries. And you have Qatar. And Qatar is interesting because Qatar hosts Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. We don't need to go in. It would be a waste of words to
explain why
talk
that's
about
wrong,
that. But it's kind of just been accepted that because Qatar has such strong ties and such strong contacts within the group, that it's a useful mediator to kind of move things forward.
Specifically on the Hamas side. But it's interesting because a lot of this positive media in Israel is kind of making it so that the Israeli public is convinced, no, Qatar is actually on our side, so to speak. I think that's
which is an interesting play, isn't that right?
Yeah,
from a PR perspective, that's an interesting thing to pull.
So part of this entire alleged exchange was paying for that positive coverage. Part of what they were accused of doing, these two media advisors for Netanyahu, was putting out statements that promote this Qatari agenda or pro-Qatar agenda, as if it were Prime Minister's office statements.
So that I didn't read. I want to say that is from reports.
That is according to reports. That is not in. That's correct.
That is not something I can confirm.
That is something that has been across multiple media reports. That is not something that was actually in the court document that the gag order was lifted from.
I do want to say that we're recording on Wednesday, and
so much could happen.
So much could happen by a few hours from now, by tomorrow. So
literally in the past 24 hours, so much has already happened.
So much has changed. So we're gonna keep an eye on things and see how they develop. And one thing that kind of really struck out to me this week was that with all of this kind of internal strife that we're going through, at least in my circles, I've been kind of hearing about the hostages a little bit less, which broke my heart a little bit. And then I kind of made an effort to seek out that information more, that to sort of keep things in perspective, that yes, there are crazy legal clouds hanging over our heads, and we don't know what's going to come out, but we need to remember what's important. What's important is our values, not leaving our people behind, making sure that they come home. And after so long, and the more that there's every few days another testimony coming out from hostages about other living hostages that they were with and the conditions that they're in. And we just, for me, like it really struck me, especially like with switching to the beat and everything, and kind of going into this more internal, maybe more personal space of just wait a damn minute. What are we a part of here? What do we actually care about? What's important to us? And so I think.
Yeah, that's super. I was really amazed. Last week, you and I attended and participated in the Women Leaders Summit by the Jerusalem Post, and it was a really beautiful, really exciting event. And something that really blew me away is that every interviewee mentioned the hostages at some point and kind of insisted on it. And even
when it had nothing to do with them,
most of the time it didn't have
it was about tech and AI. Like
at one point, I realized that there was this competition that we host. It's the Next Generation Women Entrepreneurship Award, and the competition that reaches for that award. And I think almost every single competitor out of 5 competitors insisted on, like, at the end of their speech, like, mentioning the hostages. And I think even one of the companies dedicated their technology or their development or their product or service to a specific hostage that influenced ideology in some way. So it was really beautiful.
Wow.
So some people are still keeping that in mind.
And it's important. And the protests are still kind of happening, and they're still alive and beating. But I do think it's just important right now to keep in mind, like, there's a lot happening internally. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
Don't lose track of the big picture.
There's the big picture that we need to keep in mind, and that's, remember the hostages. The hostages need to be constantly in our mind and our hearts. And on the other hand, we need to continue living. We need to continue being people.
Yeah.
And doing that without them home is just against what, like, Israel and
which
Israeli
is pretty much what every freed hostage has said, that their healing and the healing of all of us as a people, as a unit,
depends on every single one of them home.
It cannot begin. It can't begin until these hostages are back. So, hoping.
Nevertheless, on an individual level, it is important to feel human.
It is. We were talking about this recently about scheduling. What was it? Dance or scheduling salsa. Yes. Like, are we feeling okay going to salsa?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
For context, we salsa dance recreationally.
That is a very generous. That is so generous. I've missed every single one.
Looking at, like, the positive is important in some times, and that's what we have kind of
to balance.
Instead of a regular interview today, we have several interviewees, and they are different web desk editors speaking to us about what they like the most about this holiday season that's coming up, what they like the most about Israeli food, what their favorite article that they've written for the Jerusalem Post was. Light, fluffy things, because
so
sometimes
I hope someone mentions matzah and chocolate, because that is
so
iconic. Oh,
so
okay.
I'll reveal a little something to you guys behind the scenes. We recorded all the interviews, and the mics didn't work. So we're going to re-record all of it. But I'll tell you that in the original recordings, 2 people talked about matzah with chocolate. So
wow.
You're on the right side of this game.
I'm on the right side of history.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
So hopefully we'll see the same 2 of them, or we'll be surprised by somebody else talking about maybe more matzah, maybe some gefilte fish. We'll see.
All right.
So with that, we'll let them take it away. Eve, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being here so much.
Don't. You hate it. It's really
I really love being here.
It's because you spend so much time with me.
I mean, I would just say that I generally love being here. We can admit that today I'm a little bit busy. And
you are.
I'm stressed about all the other things I have to do today.
For people who don't know, like, calling somebody Polish in, like, Israeli culture is like calling them, like, passive aggressive. And I'm very Polish when it comes to getting you to do things with me that are work related. I'm just like, I know you don't love me, but can you please
be on the podcast just this once for me, your old mother?
But listen, in this case, when we're doing these fun episodes, you do genuinely have a fun perspective. Like, for example,
oh, thank you.
You do, though. You do, because you have like, first of all, a quirky background, and also
a quirky background.
That's like my nice way of putting it, because I could just start
a quirky background.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what.
But
No,
okay.
for example, we were talking about holiday traditions heading into this holiday season.
Okay.
Do you have any like fun holiday traditions, like not just Passover, but like the entire Omer period, Shavuot?
Oh, I love
those
the
holidays.
Omer. I forget to count the Omer every single year. Like every single year, I count like one day of
It's
Omer
really
and then
easy.
I
You go
forget.
1 and then 2.
It's kind of like that. So I started counting the Omer and like I forget every year and then like you miss a day and then you stop
Right.
and whatever. That's like my understanding of the halacha. This is not halachic advice. And one time I told my parents' rabbi that as a joke. I was like, haha, I forget to count every year. And he was like, oh. And I was like, it was a joke, actually. You can laugh.
You can join me in.
He was like, oh. I was like, rude. Judgment from a rabbi?
You know, I thought you'd have all the fun Passover tradition. You know, my family is a little bit secular. I've mentioned it in the past on this podcast. And for example, in the Seder table, we have an orange because of some rabbi in Europe.
The orange. I love the orange on the Seder table. It's an awesome tradition. My family does it as well. And it comes from, I actually can't remember who said this right now, which is terrible.
A European rabbi, I know that.
Who said that a woman at the bima or like a woman leading service. I can't remember the quote, but it was like a woman doing some role.
Rabbi or some kind of
is
like having an orange at the Seder table.
So then everyone who loves women put oranges on the Seder plate. We love that. Also, I said a rabbi did a rude thing earlier. Do you think that I'm going to go to hell now for that? Should we cut that out of the podcast so no one will ever know that I said the rabbi was rude?
I think you're allowed to criticize rabbis.
And also, to be fair, like, I don't know if it was actually rude so much as like if you're a rabbi and you laugh at one of your congregants saying that they're doing sins, maybe that's not good rabbiing.
So maybe he didn't want to laugh at you so much as like he wanted to show genuine concern.
Yeah, I think he just cared about my eternal soul. I don't think we do eternal souls in Judaism so much. I think he just cared about, my observance, and I respect my parents' rabbi. But I wanted him to laugh. It was a joke, and he didn't laugh, and I was hurt.
I'm laughing here and now.
Thank you.
For you in the moment. You know, another tradition that I really love in Passover is beetroot on the Seder table to commemorate Ukrainian Jews who are currently suffering.
Oh, that's
amid
so
the war.
nice. Yeah. In general, my perspective on Judaism, Eve's Judaism style. I think that adaptations for the time we live in are incredible and important. I grew up in the conservative movement, so that makes a lot of sense. That's very a central tenet in that movement. And I just love, I love any type of adaptation, any type of change that makes religion more central to our lives. So a former boss once told me something that I really kept with me, which is if religion matters to us, if religion is important to us in our lives, why would we not update our religious practice to match our values and beliefs?
Right.
So if we value and believe that, we should support women in their religious roles, then we can put an orange on the Seder plate for them or a beetroot for Ukraine.
Which, by the way, is not technically halachically unsound. It's just not.
So he also meant it for things that are halachically considered by some to be unsound, such as not having separation between men and women, which some don't accept as halachically acceptable. I grew up in communities that do, but it's exactly things like that. If we believe that men and women are equally able to lead in any capacity, then why in religion, the most important or one of the most important parts of some of our lives, not mine, but in general,
people's lives,
why would we not update our practice to match our value system?
That's a really beautiful system to think by. But I do want to also talk about
traditions that I like. Or have we moved past that?
No, we moved past that.
Okay,
but we're past tradition. We're into specifically food. So not even looking at religion. I know that you are a major Taco Bell girly. We have traveled for work before, and the first thing
Taco Bell, you could hire me away from J-Post if you wanted to.
Oh,
I just want you to know. I doubt anyone who worked for Taco Bell hears our podcast, tragically. But if you're hearing this, it wouldn't have to be a very good offer. It could be an okay offer.
Really low
I would come right. I mean, the bar's just high because it's Taco Bell. But yes, I love Taco Bell.
I remember when we traveled for work together last year, I landed before you.
Oh my God.
And you texted me and you're like, I'm so tired. This flight was all I need is a quesadilla. Get me a quesadilla. Go to Taco Bell. And you were so excited also because the hotel we stayed at was around
the street from Taco Bell. And I've never been so happy in my life. And I've never been so upset to get food poisoning. I got food poisoning on that trip.
And it wasn't from Taco Bell.
And it wasn't from Taco Bell. It was from the fancy restaurant
Yeah, we went to a really fancy restaurant, and that
fancy nice restaurant whose name we will not say, but who gave me food poisoning
Yeah.
when I had planned to go to Taco Bell twice that day, like for breakfast and for lunch before our flight. And then I went 0 times. I went to CVS for ginger ale. It was horrible.
Oh, you poor
It was,
thing.
oh my God, it was, I don't want to talk about it anymore, but that was really
Triggered.
sad.
It was very upsetting, and also from the outside, very funny time.
It was
I'll be
not
honest.
so funny, and I can't really talk about it, but I can just say that I owe my life to our photographer, Mark Israel Selim.
Well,
I owe him my life.
Unrelated to that, he's a phenomenal photographer.
The whole cab ride of ours to the airport and the whole plane ride, I was just like, thank God that he's a dad and I don't have to be so embarrassed.
Yeah, that's true.
He's a dad. So
He is a dad.
he's
a
seen
very proud
everything.
dad of very cute twins.
But it was honestly, it was just,
yeah.
can we move on back to Taco Bell?
Right. No, we're actually moving on past Taco Bell. So
Okay.
you live in Israel, though. So
I
you
do.
eat Taco Bell when you're in the U.S., but we don't have Taco Bell here.
It's
So
really
setting
messed
aside
up. Yeah.
Taco Bell, we're not doing a comparative because I know Taco Bell for you is
It's
above
the
everything.
best. Yeah.
But in terms of like Israeli food, what Israeli food or Mediterranean, Middle Eastern food are you just like, wow, like this is the reason I live here, like that stuff? Okay, maybe not like that level, but you know, like oh, this stuff's good.
I mean, what if I do like Jewish food or
We
like
do Jewish food
or like what is it? It's Eastern European Jewish
Yeah.
vibes.
Yeah.
Very Ashki. I'm half Ashki if you couldn't tell.
You're half.
I mean,
that's true, I knew that.
my dad's like Chilean-y, whatever.
Yeah, you're a Latina.
It's a mix.
Like
It's a mix. I mean, it's like a mix, right? Like old American family,
Yeah.
Chilean, whatever. Old American family. I qualify for the Daughters of the American Revolution. I can't say that I desire to join the organization. No offense. Like I don't really know much about them besides what I've seen in Gilmore Girls, but I do qualify.
What is your Eastern European Jewish food that you like?
I like gefilte fish.
Oh, gefilte fish
But
is great.
only sweet gefilte fish. Yeah, salty gefilte fish is a no for me, dog.
So I do have a story. I told you this already, but I'll tell the podcast listeners. I had a friend in the army named Tamar, and Tamar was German with a heavy German accent. And one time we closed Shabbat, which just means staying on base during the weekend for whatever task you have to complete for your army service. And we worked in different offices, and I just remember hearing like, and I go, come in, and then Tamar comes in, and he's like, Tamar, do you want gefilte fish? And he's like, and it's all in Hebrew, so it's Tamar, gefilte fish. And it was the funniest thing because like he's so sweet, but like it was the funniest thing to hear in a German accent. And I was like, sure. And then he goes and comes back, and he's like, do you want it salt or sweet? And I'm just like, what? And he's asking again. It's in Hebrew, so
That's
it's so
like,
funny.
so impressive. I've never been in a situation where there was an option for do you want
Yeah,
a
so
salty
his
or a sweet
mom-
gefilte?
His mom made homemade and separate containers of like
What
salty
a
gefilte fish.
lady.
She was 10
Oh
out of
my
10,
goodness.
And that gefilte fish was bomb. So I'm with you. I'm a big.
I
gefilte
really
fish
like
girly.
gefilte fish. I think it's a bad rap. I feel like I haven't read the macros, but it's probably got some degree of protein and is somewhat good for you in some ways.
Right. I
Maybe.
mean, it's very
I don't really
gelatinous,
know.
which means that it's very fatty as well.
Oh, really? But I thought the gelatinous part was just like, I don't know. I just assumed
You
they
thought
just
they
put-
added gelatin?
No, yeah, I assumed that the broth is made with gelatin.
That's an option. Wait, are you
I don't know.
pro or anti carrot with gefilte
I
fish?
love carrot with gefilte fish, and I think it's not just a garnish; it's like a very important part of the flavor palette.
Oh, interesting.
Have you read that book about Mrs. Tush and Mrs. Katz? It's like a book where this lady puts a carp in her bathtub and then eventually makes it into gefilte fish, but it's like a kid's book about the carp in the
That's
bathtub.
so messed up as a children's book.
I don't remember it being like messed up or scarring as a children's book. As a child, I don't remember like being triggered. I don't remember it being like a hard book to read. No, it was a great book about gefilte fish.
About killing a fish in your bathtub.
About the ways that our not forefathers but recent ancestors in New York, I think the book is based, used to make gefilte fish
That's
with a fresh carp that they kept alive in the bathtub for a few days. I don't know why.
That's a delightful story. Speaking of delightful stories, you have spent the past year now working as a correspondent, and before that, you were also a breaking news editor at the Jerusalem Post. And I was wondering, just like anecdotally, if you have like a favorite article that you've written so far.
I don't have a favorite article. I have so many articles that I feel very privileged to have written.
Yeah.
Like truly, truly privileged. Especially in the past year, like the absolute horror that we've seen has come along with a lot of like truly incredible human spirit and heroism and empathy and really beautiful things. So one example of that is I interviewed the grandson of Chaim Perry, who was taken hostage from Nir Oz and killed in captivity. And before we knew that Chaim had been killed and before his body was returned to Israel, I interviewed his grandson, Mai Perry. And it was very sad. A grandson who doesn't know what's happened to his grandfather, who he loves and has learned so much from. But it was also incredibly inspiring to hear his desire for a good ending and for a real solution for everyone in the region, for Palestinians, for Israelis, for everyone.
And he had a lot of empathy as well for like
he had an
other
incredible
sides.
I don't believe in maybe sides are those who are able to have empathy and those who aren't, but like he did have a ton of empathy for those in Gaza and those suffering in Gaza. And I remember in the interview when he said that to me, I kind of stopped him and I was like, I feel like you saying that is non-trivial. Like the grandson of a hostage who he spent a ton of time on Nil Oz, which we know was absolutely devastated in the Hamas October 7th attack. So someone who has suffered so much personal harm and loss in the attack, to express empathy for Gazans, I stopped him and I said, "What?" And he said he was just like, "Of course, it doesn't take a huge amount of nobility. It doesn't take a huge measure of spirit," which I think that he has both those things, but he was like, it's obvious. They're people suffering. They're people. We should feel empathy for them. And I think that's incredible. And I also think if he can do it, who are we not to? Right. If someone who has been through so much horrifying, horrible trauma can remember his humanity, I think we all have an obligation to try to match that.
It's really beautiful. You know, it's hard, like, because there's a balance that you need to maintain here, right? Because on the one hand, like, we need to always be thinking of the hostages, and we do. It's important. It's part of our like DNA as an Israeli people. Like, we need to bring all our hostages home. On the other hand, there is some level of just like on a basic human level, not wanting to suffer within our own thoughts day in and day out. And so there's something to be said about stories that are both devastating and hopeful.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important balance to maintain. So that's a really beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Chevy, welcome to the podcast. Yeah.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast. You're not nervous
you.
at all to be on the podcast.
No, not at all.
You're very calm.
Yeah, very calm.
So
Happy
you
to be here.
So you made Aliyah how long ago?
3 years ago, like just over 3 years ago now.
Oh, that's like really nothing.
Yeah.
So you had some time in the country before we broke out into war and chaos.
Exactly. And I've been here before, so
Yeah. Yeah, what Jew hasn't, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of part of the shtick. And you're from Australia, England, South Africa.
you're closer with the last two. England / South Africa.
Both.
Not Australia. Yeah.
I guess the accent's mixed in my
I
head.
grew up in London and then I moved to South Africa with my family like a couple of years ago. So
Oh, okay. So the accents didn't mix. It's still
Yeah, and I'm
English.
still very British.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So wait. So English food is known to be, I guess, somewhat controversial. Is there like,
Why?
oh, come on, you guys eat like freaking blood hot dogs? What is that?
No, I don't eat that stuff. Yeah.
It's not great. Is there like an Israeli food that in your head is like, whoa, I would stay in the country just for this?
Very like basic, like I guess shawarma.
Oh,
I think falafel, yeah, but like shawarma.
shawarma's good. Shawarma's. Would you take it in a pita, laffa, or on a plate?
Any of the above, but like usually the pizza, because like the laffa is like too big, and the
It
plate,
is quite
like, you
big.
got to have the bread as well. But,
Yeah, it balances out a little bit.
yum, I love shawarma.
So we're heading into holiday season, right? So I'm curious if you have like a favorite tradition, not necessarily like central tradition, but like a tradition of your own maybe, or like just something from the regular kind of customs, not just of Passover, but like basically any of the holidays of like Passover into the Omer and Shavuot.
Can't think of one right now. I'm normally with my family. So I go to my family for Pesach, and we normally do. Well, they do 2 seders, so I have to do one. But when we were little, me and my sister used to like always like make games for like the plagues in the seder.
Oh, that's so
And if
cute.
we'll do that now, we're a bit
As
old now.
full-grown adults.
Yeah. So that was cute. We like used to always make like little props and things and games and like forced everyone to do it. So
Force everybody into the game.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
you know,
pretend they liked it.
I was born here and like moved to the U.S. and then moved back. And when I before moving to the U.S., when I lived here, like I remember my last Passover before moving, and you know they pass around the Haggadah and people take turns reading from it, and I couldn't read. I was a child.
How old were you?
I must have been 4 or 5. I couldn't have been 5. I would have been 4. and I couldn't read. So I just started, like, off the top of my head telling the story of Peter Pan when it became my turn. And I didn't understand why everybody's laughing. I'm like, you guys made up a story. Why don't I get to make up a story? What do you
And
mean?
you thought that's what everyone was doing.
That's a perfectly normal thing to do. And like I tried to like make it like a continuation of the story that they had told, but I didn't understand what they were saying because they were talking in biblical Hebrew. So I was
Very
just like,
cute.
and then Peter Pan took Wendy, and I was in my own world. So you know what?
Yeah.
Here's to young traditions.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, you have worked at the J Post now for about half a year, I want to say?
Just over now, like
Just
8
over?
months. I started in August.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that you haven't gotten to write so much, but you have edited a whole bunch. Do you have like a favorite story that you worked on that you were reading it at the same time and you were like, what on earth? This is weird. This is cool. This is something like that.
I can't think off the top of my head right now, but like there's always like interesting things. Like I think sometimes you're just like reading by rote, and other times you're like, oh my God, like what is this? There's been some weird ones. There was one where I don't remember who wrote it, so sorry. But she like was comparing, she was describing her shopping experience, like buying fruit and veg, and she was comparing like our people or people in the government to the vegetables. Not too flattering.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
So I enjoyed that one.
Wait, which fruit or veg was
I
like?
don't remember
the Prime
who
Minister?
said what, or like, but she was like, so and so, yeah, he reminds me of an eggplant. So and so was like, wish I could remember the name. It's probably better that I don't.
I always used to
I
say
remember that
that
one.
like
I told my friends about it.
Lieberman reminds me of like the head of a leek, just shape of the face
Yeah.
wise. So you know what? Maybe it was according to appearance. I don't know.
No, but she was just like going around the shops picking vegetables, and she was like, this is like Trump, this is like Bibi or whatever. I wish I could remember which ones.
That's really
That was like the most like wild one. Most of them are like normally more straightforward.
more newsy.
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was an op-ed.
Yeah, but well, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us.
That's all. Thank you. It's fun. Bye.
Aaron, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Happy to be here, Tamar.
We'll tell the audience the little secret of this is our second time attempting to record this.
We had a whole dramatic back and forth calling each other our sworn nemesis regarding Eurovision.
But now we've discovered a new animosity that we have, and it's about tuna. You didn't want to bring this up. However, yeah, no, I know that I am of the wrong opinion here. I'll say this. I'll tell you what. I grew up with the knowledge that I'm allergic to fish, and I don't know what fish. I went to an allergist, and I asked, how do I know which fish I'm allergic to so I know which fish I'm allowed to eat? And he said, you want an honest answer? And I said, yes, of course I want an honest answer. And he said, buy a bunch of different kinds of sushi and go eat them in a hospital and wait. So I grew up not eating any kind of fish, including tuna. So I only know the bad side of tuna, which is the smell. It doesn't smell great. I'm sure it tastes divine. I, however, cannot eat a can of tuna.
I understand allergies and their concerns, and I respect them, and I respect you. I will be polite and mature and not fully engage regarding my opinions regarding your tuna slander, but I'll say that you have good taste too. You and I share a camaraderie in our hatred of pickles, justifiable hatred of pickles, mind you. But,
I know we're bad Jews for that, but it's
but
true.
you also have a very divisive opinion regarding the enjoyment of pineapple pizza.
It's delicious, okay? It's absolutely phenomenal. But wait, let's get to the subject at hand. If there was like a food in Israel, Israeli food that for you is like, okay, this is the reason I'm here, what Israeli food would you say it is?
Well, I would love at this point to say pizza with tuna toppings, because that's a thing in this country.
This is true. You ate that just the other day.
It's good, okay, and pissed off half the office, but it's
It was a very intense smell.
but I will be honest and say that it is far more basic falafel and hummus. And while that may sound surprising, here are the facts, okay? Falafel and hummus outside of like the Middle East is garbage,
This is true.
okay? Here, like it tastes, they're completely different tastes. Growing up, like my school would serve falafel sometimes, and like they wasn't very good. The catering was called 5-star catering, which means it wasn't 5 stars.
It reminds me of in Don't Mess with the Zohan. There's an electronic store
Going out
called
of business.
Yeah.
It's good for business. Yeah. So they would serve falafel, and it was disgusting. And it took me like 3 years after making Aliyah to actually eat falafel and hummus. But when I
Plug
did,
up the courage.
but when I did, game changer. Like it's
real stuff. Yeah.
it's really good. I can now just a whole meal can just be some bread and hummus, and that could be because hummus is a protein.
Technically,
So-
chickpeas are a protein. That is true. You know, my husband put me on to we're here in Jerusalem, so we're very close to the Arab village of Abu Ghosh, and Abu Ghosh has phenomenal hummus. And he put me on to Halevanonit, the Lebanese hummus place
Oh.
that's inside Abu Ghosh, and it is chef's kiss. It is phenomenal. It is delicious. It is creamy. It's got a kick to. Oh, it's just excellent. Highly recommend.
So I can't say I've been. For me, the best I ever had. I don't even know the name of the place, but when I made Aliyah and did my last year of high school here at a place called YTA, it was right in Bayevagan, right next to the Har Herzl light rail station. Across the street was this like real hole in the wall like falafel
Those
shawarma
are
place.
the best ones.
10 shekel for falafel pita hummus, and
Yeah,
it
stuff.
was amazing. And I've yet to have better ones.
You know, I think that the English have a similar rule about like fish and chips. Like the crappier, the better. Like as long as the worse the place looks, the better the food is.
How
So,
would you know it involves fish?
fair. You know what? It applies.
I find your opinion rather suspicious.
Really.
I would have said
you could have gone
fishy.
easier. You could have just said it's fishy.
Yeah, I'm too extra for that.
Oh, nice. So let's zoom out real quick. 'cause we're
Scale
going
back
to
real bit,
Scale back.
like on a fish.
Let's back it.
Okay, I'm finished with the puns.
Oh, good Lord. Okay, we are headed into the holiday season. Well, this holiday season of the two major Jewish holiday seasons. Passover, all the Omer holidays, Shavuot. Is there like a specific holiday tradition that you prefer above all else?
What would you say if I told you it involved fish?
I wouldn't be surprised in the least. By the way, the only fish I do eat, because I just tried it accidentally one time, I thought my grandma's gefilte fish was knedelach, was matzo balls.
I see that.
So I tried, yeah, because it can be confusing visually. So I tried it, and I didn't blow up like a fish. Blowfish? That was a joke. Anyway, I wasn't allergic to it, so I'm
Totally
allowed,
different kind of fish, Tamar. Come on.
I'm allowed to eat gefilte fish, is my point. But yes, okay, it's fishy. Let's hear it.
Okay. Well, it isn't actually fishy, but I just wanted to annoy you about that.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, so favorite holiday traditions. One thing, it's that this is something I would do for the past several years, is every Seder, we would always do this thing with marshmallows. The person who hosted the Seder, whoever it was, would ask everyone questions, and for every question right, they throw you a marshmallow. You tell a Dvar Torah, they throw you a marshmallow. And they learn not to apply that last one to me, because I would just give half-hour Dvar Torahs every single minute, and the Seder would last forever.
What is so, and then you're prized with like marshmallow like as a treat, like that's
Yes.
the point? Okay, it doesn't have like any kind of like chubby bunny game to follow it or something.
If only, no. Other funny traditions include making elaborate sound effects during Qatargate every Seder, the song at
Nice,
the very
yes.
end of the Seder. Yeah, which I could happily recite, but we don't have time for that. And I don't think
Nobody has time for
if anyone even wants to hear it.
Yeah, I grew up in a relatively secular family. We don't get through all of Chad Gadya. It's way too long there. So okay, wait. Let's say you've been in Israel for how long now?
It's 12 years, I think. I'm
Wow.
bad at math.
This is true. You are. We have figured this out in the past. So you've been in Israel for 12 years, and you've been with the J Post already for 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, or leading up to 5 years.
I'm into my 6th year.
Oh wow!
I started in
okay.
2019.
Oh, amazing. Okay, so is there
Not counting the time at Light Talk.
now? Aaron, you have been a viral sensation for the Jerusalem Post with your asteroid articles that compare them to different people, monuments, and animals. They've been retweeted by some pretty big folk around the world.
Apparently, Ben
Obviously,
Shapiro is a fan of mine.
yes, Ben Shapiro is quite the fan of yours. I know that also your big article was your breakout article, really, was the Galactic Federation article about this book written by an Israeli, the former head of the Israeli Astrological Agency, I want to say, something like that.
Israel Space Agency.
Space Agency, sorry, claiming that there's a galactic federation of aliens that Trump and Netanyahu are in on, and so on and so forth. I want to know, including those, but also beyond that, is there like a favorite article that you've written through the years?
Yes, and it isn't, as much as I loved all of those, it isn't any of those. Well, first off, my true breakout article, I think, was my article about Uri Geller dropping his lawsuit against Nintendo. Against Pokemon. That got me on TV that one time.
Oh my God, right, because Al-Kazam,
Kadabra.
Is it Kadabra who's bending a spoon the way that
His name in Japanese is also Yungeler. It is literally based on him. There's more to the lawsuit than that, but the point is he dropped it after 20 years.
I would be flattered if I got a Pokemon named after me, let me tell you.
I know. And I'm sure that you could argue that there is one. So there was that, and other big articles include the whole time Jewish Antifa hacked the KKK.
God,
that was a lot of fun. But I think the best article I've ever actually written was probably this big article I did about Israel's hypnosis laws.
Which are weirdly strict.
Yeah, they're like, you can't do stage hypnosis. You can't do only very few select group of people are actually allowed to practice hypnotherapy. They're licensed to. It's very small. And hypnosis studies have advanced so much more since 1981, I think, when this law was passed. But Israel doesn't use them, even though Israel passed a law.
That's so interesting.
About it.
Here, so Israeli lawmakers were looking at you. What the hell? What the hypnosis is?
I mean, Abir Kara did talk to me about it back when he was an MK. And he basically said that this whole thing is just an excuse by this. These are his words, not mine. Are that he was against the cartel that was the Israel Hypnosis Association. I can't remember the full name of the organization off the top of my head.
The cartel.
He called them a cartel, which the word cartel does not necessarily refer to Latin America-based drug organizations. It refers to a monopoly of sorts.
Got it. Okay, interesting. I know that hypnosis is used, for example, to help cure addiction to nicotine. And that is, or at least for some organizations, that is legal in Israel. I know a friend who managed to quit according to that. But it is interesting to hear that those stage performances that you always see. I love the movie Now You See Me.
It was a really good movie.
It was a very good movie, and the hypnosis representation there, where the guy, the first time he's the how do you call somebody who hypnotizes?
Hypnotist?
Hypnotist. That's, yep. Oh, right. I should have known that. The hypnotist, the first time he's presented, he's on this cruise or something with a couple, and he manages to hypnotize this woman into not being able to speak while he gets out of her husband that he cheated on her with her sister. And that is so funny to me. And just imagine, and there was also this famous clip from 2007 of this hypnotist going to a high school and hypnotizing a young boy into every time that this theme song came on, he stood up and thought he was Superman. And there's so many funny shticks, but also it is a little bit scary, people getting in your head and stuff.
Yeah, I spoke to Uri Geller about it, because of course I did.
Uri Geller and you are
he's great, and he has all of his claims of psychic powers, and I'm not here to talk about that, but he did tell me that his hypnosis is separate. That's something he learned. And he, who has practiced hypnotism, hypnosis on stage, said that he very much supported Israel's law.
Interesting. So he, as somebody who understands the capabilities of hypnotism, says, yeah, we should keep that stuff out of here.
Yeah, he has a whole story about him when he hypnotized Michael Jackson, which was a whole thing.
Goodness gracious. All right.
Yeah,
well,
that's maybe a discussion for another time.
I want to hear all about it, but yeah, another time is definitely in order. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. Oh, I forgot to talk about the crack. Damn.
Hold on a second. You just said crack? You forgot to talk about crack? Okay, we need to stop for a second.
Okay.
Go back.
So, in our original recording about this for favorite holiday traditions, we actually mentioned favorite holiday foods. And what I mentioned was a favorite holiday food for Passover. It was crack. Crack, specifically matzah crack. It's a dessert. It is amazing. Our graphic designer, Sarah Goldstein, makes the best crack.
Matzah crack. Just say matzah crack. For anybody who doesn't know, it's kind of like peppermint bark during Christmas time, except instead of peppermint, it's usually a toffee or a caramel on matzah with a milk or dark chocolate. It's a really great contrast of flavors.
No nicotine is involved. No narcotics. No nicotine including. But no narcotics are involved, except for unless you count sugar as one, and that is not a euphemism. I really mean the sweetener known as sugar, and not any other white powders.
Well, thank you so much for coming here to talk about hypnotism and crack.
And that shall be my legacy. I thought it would be asteroids, but it is in fact hypnosis and crack.
Thank you for joining us for the Jerusalem Post podcast. If you liked this episode, please make sure to give it a like, comment, subscribe. You can reach out to us at podcast@jpost.com, and you can find us on jpost.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be well.